Imagine possessing like a biological operating manual that is so incredibly powerful that an invading empire actually threatened you with execution just for practicing it.
Yeah, it sounds completely made up, like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Right, it really does. But we are actually talking about a very real physical technology here, a whole system of human optimization that was considered so potent and so dangerous to the established hierarchy of the time that for literally 3,000 years, it was hidden away.
Hidden in Himalayan caves, yeah.
Exactly. Passed down only in secret, like in the dead of night, to just a handful of these rigorously tested initiates. But fast forward to today, and you can practice that exact same technology while you're sitting in traffic.
Or, your living room right before a morning Zoom meeting.
Yeah. We're unpacking the hacked ancient software of Kundalini. And I think the contrast between those two worlds is just fascinating.
Oh, it's the perfect lens for this deep dive. I mean, we are looking at a system that survived millennia of active suppression. And when you look at the sheer volume of our sources for this deep dive today, you really start to understand why it survived.
Yeah, the source stack is massive this time.
It really is. We have the ancient yogic texts like the Upanishads, which are essentially the theoretical physics manuals of the ancient world.
Right.
But then we also have all this empirical modern data. We're talking historical training manuals from the Kundalini Research Institute, the direct lectures of Yogi Bhajan, who brought this to the West, and most crucially, all these peer-reviewed neuroanatomy papers.
Which is where it gets crazy.
Totally. We've got Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory in here, and even the emerging field of quantum biology regarding biophoton fields.
Okay, let's unpack this because our mission today is very specific. If you follow the wellness space at all, you already know the buzzwords. You've heard of chakras. You've heard of the vagus nerve.
You've definitely seen people in white turbans doing that rapid breathing on social media.
Oh, absolutely. And from the outside, it can look like this deeply inaccessible, mystical cult, or just a very confusing religion. So we are stripping all of that intimidation and jargon away.
Yeah, that's the goal.
The goal today is to provide you with a comprehensive, practical shortcut to understanding this practice. We are looking at this not as magic, but as a tangible, scientific technology for nervous system regulation.
Which really requires looking past the cultural packaging. We often confuse the vehicle with the destination.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because the cultural trappings, the specific clothes, or the Sanskrit vocabulary, those are just the vehicle. The destination is a fundamentally altered neurophysiology.
Right.
It is an applied science of human potential. It was engineered to create a very specific biological outcome, which is a highly resilient, self-regulated human being.
So to understand how a breathing technique can actually change your neurobiology, we really have to look at the laboratory where this was all developed. The sources point the origins of this technology back to the Indus-Sarasvati civilization.
Which is roughly 7,000 BCE.
Yeah, 7,000 BCE. We are talking about an era predating formal organized religions entirely. Humanity is basically just figuring out large-scale agriculture, right? And meanwhile, these ancient researchers, the rishis, are systematically mapping the human nervous system.
It's incredible to think about. And the archaeological evidence from that era shows these seals depicting figures sitting in specific complex postures.
And we now recognize those as advanced meditative locks, right?
Exactly. These rishis were utilizing their own bodies as the ultimate laboratory equipment. They observed subtle shifts in their digestion, their cognitive clarity, their emotional reactivity.
Even their heart rates, without any modern tech to monitor it.
Yeah, they just felt it. They tested specific postures, combined them with really precise breathing ratios, and then they cataloged the psychological and physiological results over generations.
It was just a rigorous, iterative process of trial and error.
Pretty much. And
Yeah.
the wild part is it was completely open source back then.
Right. Everyday people use these techniques to regulate their stress and maintain their health. But then the geopolitical landscape shifted dramatically. Nomadic invasions swept through the Indian subcontinent.
Yeah, the sources describe this basically 3,000-year period where this open source biological software was forced completely underground.
Which makes sense because the mechanics of empire are kind of the same regardless of the era, right? Conquerors rely on subjugation.
Completely. They require a population that is compliant, easily intimidated, and reliant on external authority.
So if a population possesses a technology that systematically eliminates fear,
Then they can't be subjugated. If you have a practice that balances the nervous system and cultivates a profound sense of internal sovereignty, you just can't be controlled. A human being anchored in a state of absolute physiological safety cannot be terrorized into compliance.
Wow. Yeah. The invading forces understood that, so they literally forbade the practice. It became contraband knowledge.
Yeah, and the guardians of this technology, the surviving masters, they realized that if these techniques were systematically destroyed, or worse, co-opted by the invaders, the knowledge would be permanently erased.
So their response was to institute a code of absolute, uncompromising secrecy.
Exactly. The knowledge transitioned from this open science to a strict esoteric mystery school. It was passed from a single guru to a single disciple.
And the testing for those disciples was brutal. I mean, the texts mention students waiting outside ashrams for years and enduring intense psychological and physical stress just to prove their nervous systems could even handle the training.
Yeah, a student might spend a decade mastering just the microscopic nuances of a single breath pattern.
10 years on one breath pattern.
Right. And only then would the master reveal the next step in the sequence. It was the ultimate proprietary lockdown.
I look at it kind of like a hostile corporate takeover.
Yeah.
You have this immensely powerful open source software designed to optimize human hardware. Then a hostile corporation, the invading empires, takes over, realizes the software makes the users way too independent, and just locks it down.
That's a perfect analogy.
It gets hidden away on an encrypted server for 3 millennia, and only a few elite hackers in these isolated monasteries actually have the encryption keys.
And that lockdown held for thousands of years until a very specific cultural inflection point, which was 1969.
Right, the Cultural Revolution in the West. You have Woodstock, the moon landing, the anti-war movement, and this man named Yogi Bhajan travels from India to Los Angeles and essentially hacks the server.
He really did. He takes this encrypted, highly guarded technology and just releases it directly to the public.
And the timing there is so critical to understand his motivation, I think.
Oh, absolutely. He observed the 1960s counterculture and saw a generation that was desperate for an altered state of consciousness, but they were heavily reliant on psychedelics to get there.
Right, lots of LSD.
Tons of it. And from a yogic perspective, dropping massive amounts of LSD forces the nervous system to process a level of voltage it just hasn't been structurally prepared for.
It blows out the neurological fuses.
Exactly. It fries the circuits. So Yogi Bhajan looked at this and recognized that humanity was facing unprecedented psychological pressure. He realized that keeping this technology secret was no longer protecting it.
It was denying humanity a vital survival tool.
Yeah. So he brought it out of the monastery and explicitly designed it for the chaos of modern life. He famously called it the householder's yoga.
The householder's yoga, meaning he basically stripped away all the ascetic requirements. You don't need to abandon your family or renounce your possessions and live in a cave to achieve a regulated nervous system.
Not at all. The technology is built for the person navigating, a contentious board meeting, or dealing with a crying toddler at 3 a.m, or just sitting in gridlock traffic.
It is designed to metabolize the specific high-frequency stress of the modern world.
Which is exactly what we need today.
So we finally have access to the code. But if you open up any of these ancient manuals or KRI training books, you hit a massive translation barrier. We are constantly encountering Sanskrit terminology that sounds incredibly mystical.
It really does.
So if we are going to use this technology, we need to translate the poetry of the ancient world into the biology of the 21st century.
And the translation is where the sheer genius of the rishis becomes so apparent. Let's start with the name of the system itself. Kundalini translates roughly to circular power, or the coiled snake.
Right. The classic image is that sleeping serpent coiled 3.5 times at the base of the spine, waiting to be awakened so it can travel up to the crown of the head, which, honestly, sounds like pure mythology.
It sounds totally mythological until you look at the physiological mechanisms they were trying to describe, keeping in mind they didn't have the benefit of an MRI.
Right.
So before we trace the path of that energy, we really have to look at the fuel source. The text described 2 primary energetic forces in the human body, prana and apana.
And the standard spiritual definition is that prana is the life force, the inhale, and apana is the eliminating force, the exhale. But biologically, we are actually talking about cellular respiration and metabolic waste, right?
Exactly. Prana is the taking in of life. Physiologically, we are talking about oxygenation. We are talking about the arterial blood flow delivering vital nutrients to the tissues. It has a generative, positive ionic charge.
Okay, so oxygen and nutrients coming in.
Yes. And apana is the necessary counterforce. It is the elimination of waste. Carbon dioxide, cellular exhaust, metabolic byproducts down in the lower gastrointestinal tract. and that has a negative ionic charge.
So the entire premise of Kundalini is manipulating these two forces, because the texts talk about mixing prana and apana at the navel center to create an internal heat.
Which is just a brilliant metaphorical description of increasing intra-abdominal pressure and stimulating the enteric nervous system.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When you use specific breath mechanics to draw the oxygenated energy down and pull the metabolic elimination energy up, they meet at the solar plexus. You are essentially creating a biological pressure cooker.
And once that pressure is generated, it obviously needs a conduit. The ancient maps talk about 72,000 nadis, or subtle energy channels.
And if you look at a modern anatomical map of the human fascial network or the peripheral nervous system, you see this branching, highly complex web that looks exactly like the ancient drawings of the nadis.
That's crazy how perfectly it lines up.
It is. And the yogis identified three primary superhighways within this network: the Ida, the Pingala, and the Sushumna.
So just to break that down, the Ida is the left channel associated with cooling, parasympathetic, lunar energy. The Pingala is the right channel associated with heating, sympathetic, solar energy. But the critical path, the one the coiled snake travels, is the Sushumna.
Yeah, the central channel running straight up the spine.
So what does this all mean? As this energy moves up the central channel, it intersects with the chakras. We all know the pop culture concept of a chakra as a spinning wheel of colored light. But functionally, anatomically, what were they mapping?
They were mapping the major nerve plexuses and the endocrine glands.
Just straight biology.
Straight biology. The correlation is way too precise to be coincidental. The root chakra, at the base of the spine, maps directly to the sacral nerve plexus. The solar plexus chakra maps to the celiac plexus and the adrenal glands.
And the heart chakra aligns with the cardiac plexus and the thymus gland.
Right, and the throat chakra maps to the pharyngeal plexus and the thyroid. The rishis basically mapped the precise anatomical junctions where our peripheral nervous system gathers into massive, dense intersections and where our body secretes its most potent hormones.
So to manipulate this incredibly complex system, to balance those autonomic nerve plexuses and regulate the endocrine glands, we use the primary tool of this technology, which is the Kriya. And the word translates to completed action, right?
Exactly. A Kriya is a highly specific algorithm. It combines an asana, which is the physical posture, with pranayama, the breathing pattern, and often a sound or visual focus.
Kind of like baking a cake.
How do you mean?
Well, you can't just throw flour and eggs into an unheated oven and expect a cake. You need the exact sequence of ingredients, which is the posture, the mixing, which is the breath, and the heat, to get the specific result.
That's exactly it. And it relies heavily on mudras and bandhas to provide that heat and direction.
We need a solid mechanical analogy here. If you want to lift a heavy car, you use a hydraulic jack. But a hydraulic jack only works if you close the release valve first. If the valve is open, you can pump the handle all day, the fluid just sloshes around, and the car doesn't move. You're expending energy, but achieving no structural change.
And the bandhas are the biological equivalent of closing that release valve. Bandha translates to lock.
So when you apply the root lock, which is physically contracting the perineum and the pelvic floor, you are closing the bottom valve. And when you apply the neck lock, tucking the chin to straighten the cervical spine, you are aligning the top of the hydraulic cylinder.
You trap the intra-abdominal pressure generated by the breath and the posture. Because the pressure cannot dissipate downward or outward, it's forced to move upward through the central nervous system, physically driving the cerebrospinal fluid toward the brain.
Without the locks, you are just stretching. I mean, you might get looser hamstrings, but you aren't fundamentally altering the pressure dynamics of the central nervous system.
Exactly. The Kriya is the precise combination of the posture, the breath, and the locks that produces a specific, predictable biological shift.
Okay, so we've established the physical mechanics, but let's look at the actual neuroscience. If you take a modern neurobiologist, put them in an fMRI lab, and have a practitioner perform a Kriya, what are they actually seeing on the screen? How does the poetry of the serpent map to the modern anatomy textbook?
This is the absolute focal point of the modern scientific papers in our source stack today. When we talk about the Sushumna, the central channel, the neurobiologist is looking at the spinal cord and the central nervous system, the conduit for all sensory and motor data.
And the Kundalini energy itself, because the bioquantum papers point to something incredibly specific here, the vagus nerve and the flow of cerebrospinal fluid.
Right. And to understand the vagus nerve, we really have to look closely at Stephen Portis's polyvagal theory because it completely reframes how we understand stress and human optimization.
Yeah, polyvagal theory is huge right now.
It is, and for good reason. The vagus nerve is cranial nerve 10. It wanders all the way from the brainstem down through the torso, innervating the heart, the lungs, and the entire digestive tract. It is the bidirectional communication highway between the brain and the viscera.
But most of us were taught a binary nervous system in school, right? Like you are either in fight or flight, which is sympathetic, or rest and digest, which is parasympathetic.
Yeah, that's the old model. Porges showed us it's actually a three-part hierarchical system. The oldest part of the system is the unmyelinated dorsal vagus. This is the ultimate biological emergency brake.
Like when a reptile is caught by a predator and it plays dead, it just freezes.
Exactly. In a human, this manifests as extreme dissociation, shutdown, lethargy, or deep clinical depression. The body perceives a threat so overwhelming that it drops metabolic function just to survive.
Okay, and the middle tier is the sympathetic nervous system, the classic fight or flight. You are mobilized for danger, heart rate accelerates, digestion halts, cortisol floods the system. We all know that feeling.
Unfortunately, yeah. But the most evolutionarily advanced here is the myelinated ventral vagus nerve.
Myelinated meaning it has that fatty coating, right?
Yes, the myelin sheath acts like insulation on an electrical wire, allowing signals to travel incredibly fast. When the ventral vagal system is active, it rapidly suppresses the sympathetic pacemaker in the heart. It physically slows your heart rate down.
Oh, wow.
This is the state of safety, social engagement, compassion, and cellular repair. You feel connected, creative, and physically robust.
So the scientific paper suggests that a Kundalini awakening is not like a mystical zap from the universe. It is a profound, systematic, sustained stimulation of that myelinated ventral vagal system.
Precisely. You are intentionally overriding the chronic, low-grade sympathetic stress that characterizes modern life. The constant pinging of emails, the traffic, the financial anxiety, and you are forcefully anchoring the nervous system into the ventral vagal state.
And the mechanics of how the Kriyas actually achieve this are fascinating. The breathing patterns stimulate the baroreceptor.
Yes, the baroreceptors are blood pressure sensors located in the aortic arch and the carotid sinus. When you do the deep, slow, rhythmic breathing required in a Kriya, you are stretching the blood vessels in your chest.
And those sensors pick up on that stretch.
Exactly. The baroreceptors detect this stretch, interpret it as a drop in blood pressure, and send a massive signal up the vagus nerve to the solitary tract nucleus in the brainstem.
And the brainstem responds by increasing vagal tone, instantly slowing the heart, and downregulating the stress response. It's an instant biological hack.
It really is. And while the breath is stimulating the vagus nerve, the physical pumping of those body locks we talked about is moving the cerebrospinal fluid.
The CSF, which is the clear, nutrient-rich fluid that bathes the brain and spinal cord, right? It clears metabolic waste from the brain.
Yeah. The rhythmic spinal flexions and the application of the hydraulic locks physically pump this fluid up through the spinal column and directly into the ventricles of the brain.
And the texts note that this physical pumping of the CSF directly impacts the reticular activating system in the lower brain. The RAS is basically the gatekeeper of consciousness.
That's right. It determines whether you are hyper-aroused and panicked or deeply calm and focused.
So by physically forcing a fresh wave of CSF into the brainstem, you are essentially washing the reticular activating system. You are providing a manual override, commanding the brain to shift from hypervigilant survival mode into a state of profound, alert relaxation.
You're manually changing the channel.
I am struggling with one aspect of this, though. I understand the mechanics of the breath. I totally understand the hydraulic pressure of the locks and pumping the fluid. But the Kriyas almost always require chanting.
Yes.
Chanting Sat Nam or other Sanskrit mantras feels like we are slipping right back into religion. If this is pure biology, why not just hum? Why do the specific words matter?
That is a great question. It's not the semantic meaning of the word that matters biologically. It is the physical geometry of your tongue.
Wait, really?
Yes. The yogic tradition calls this the Shabd Guru, the technology of sound. We are talking about mechanoreceptors on the roof of the mouth.
Okay, break that down.
You have 84 subtle meridian points located on the hard palate. When you chant specific syllables in Sanskrit or Gurmukhi, your tongue strikes these points in very precise rhythms. Think of it like a telegraph operator tapping out Morse code.
But instead of sending a message over a wire, you are sending a neurological signal directly to the brain.
Specifically, you are vibrating the sphenoid bone.
The sphenoid bone.
Yeah, it's a complex bone at the base of the skull, and it sits directly beneath the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. And the pituitary is the master gland of the endocrine system. It dictates your hormonal reality.
So by chanting, you aren't praying to an external deity. You are using the physical muscle of your tongue to tap a specific code on the roof of your mouth, which vibrates the sphenoid bone, which stimulates the hypothalamus, which commands the pituitary gland to alter the chemical secretions in your bloodstream.
You got it. You're self-prescribing a neurochemical shift. The sound frequencies also vibrate the skull cavity, altering brainwave patterns, moving them from the rapid, stressful beta state into the slower, restorative alpha and theta states.
It's just a precise manipulation of brain chemistry using sound, rhythm, and bone resonance.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We don't have to guess if this is working. The researchers at the Kundalini Research Institute have the actual biological data points. You can hook a practitioner up to an EKG and watch the awakening happen in real time.
You can. And the primary metric they look at is heart rate variability, or HRV.
Right, and HRV measures the variation in time between each heartbeat.
Exactly. If your heart beats exactly like a metronome, at exactly 60 beats per minute with zero variation, your HRV is incredibly low. That indicates a highly stressed, rigid nervous system stuck in sympathetic drive.
Because a healthy nervous system is adaptable, it speeds up slightly on the inhale and slows down on the exhale.
Right. High HRV means you have robust vagal tone. You can encounter a stressor, mount a response, and immediately return to baseline safety.
And the data shows that consistent Kundalini practice reliably, and honestly sometimes dramatically, increases HRV. It builds a nervous system that is fundamentally more resilient.
Which bridges us directly into the real-world application of this. Why should you dedicate 20 minutes of your morning to this?
Yogi Bhajan famously stated that the goal of this technology is to build a nervous system that is as strong as steel and steady as stone.
And we approach stress management completely backwards in the modern world. We try to think our way out of stress.
Oh, all the time.
We analyze our problems, we talk about them endlessly, or we try to physically exhaust the stress by running on a treadmill until our muscles just fail. But cognitive analysis doesn't change blood chemistry.
Kundalini bypasses the cognitive loop entirely. It acts as a direct biofeedback mechanism. You are fundamentally changing the glandular secretions in your body. You are chemically dissolving the stress architecture from the inside out.
The sources emphasize this incredibly powerfully when discussing addiction and substance abuse recovery. Because addiction is a disease of the nervous system. The dopamine pathways and the endogenous opioid system have been chemically hijacked by exogenous substances.
And you cannot talk someone out of a chemically hijacked nervous system. The hardware itself is damaged.
Right. Downregulation is the biological reality of addiction. If you flood the brain with artificial dopamine from a substance, the brain protects itself by shutting down its own dopamine receptors.
And when you remove the substance, the person is left with a nervous system incapable of experiencing natural joy or satisfaction. The world just feels flat and agonizing.
But Kundalini rebuilds the hardware. The specific rhythmic breathing and the glandular stimulation of the kriyas systematically upregulate those receptors. It reestablishes the natural endogenous flow of feel-good chemicals, the endorphins, serotonin, oxytocin.
It provides the body with a superior internal source of chemical equilibrium. You break the neurological habit of seeking external regulation because your internal pharmacy is back online and fully stocked.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. And this connects to a deeply profound concept in the texts, which is intentional sickness.
Intentional sickness, that sounds like an oxymoron.
It's a psychological defense mechanism rooted entirely in biology. When the nervous system is chronically redlining and the individual refuses to rest, the body will eventually force a shutdown.
Oh, right. We subconsciously allow our immune system to drop. We catch a severe flu, we develop chronic fatigue, or we experience a debilitating migraine.
Sickness becomes the only socially acceptable escape hatch from a nervous system that is on the verge of collapse. We use illness to secure the rest our ventral vagal system is literally screaming for.
But Kundalini removes the need for the escape hatch. By manually downregulating the stress response daily, you never reach the point of systemic collapse. You maintain cellular vitality.
The texts speak of purifying the body on a cellular level, reducing oxidative stress, and inhibiting inflammatory cascades.
I really want you to imagine the practical reality of this. Imagine opening your eyes tomorrow morning and feeling a deep, unshakable sense of vitality. You aren't happy because an external event occurred, you didn't win the lottery, you didn't get a promotion.
You're happy for absolutely no reason at all.
Exactly. Your baseline state is joy simply because your blood chemistry, your thyroid, your adrenals, and your vagus nerve are functioning in a state of perfect, harmonious equilibrium.
It is the shift from reacting to the environment to generating your own internal weather system. It is ultimate physiological sovereignty.
So if you are listening to the breakdown of this biological machinery and thinking, well, I need to upgrade my hardware, but I have absolutely no idea where to start, let's lay out the absolute beginner's blueprint. How do you engage this technology safely?
The non-negotiable first step, before you attempt any breathing or physical lock, is tuning in. You do this with the Adi mantra, Om Namo Guru Dev Namo.
And just to reiterate, we are not praying to a deity in the sky here. Think of this as dialing a highly specific frequency on a radio receiver.
Right. Om is the sound of infinite creative consciousness in manifestation. It is the hum of the universe. Namo means to bow or to call upon with reverence. Guru Dev refers to the transparent divine teacher that resides entirely within yourself.
So it roughly translates to, I call upon the infinite creative consciousness, and I call upon the profound wisdom within my own biology.
You are consciously shifting your brain out of the mundane beta wave state, worrying about the grocery list, stressing over an email, and tuning your neurological radio to a frequency of deep receptivity.
And the physical act of vibrating Ong in the cranial cavity stimulates the pineal gland.
It
right?
does. You are also consciously plugging into the golden chain, which is the lineage of practitioners who have perfected these algorithms over thousands of years.
Okay, so you sit with a straight spine, hands pressed together at the center of the chest to balance the left and right hemispheres of the brain, and you chant that 3 times.
Yes.
You are tuned in. The system is booted up. Now, what is the single most effective entry point? If a total beginner only has 3 minutes a day, what is the master exercise?
The sources are unequivocal on this. Sat Kriya. It is considered a complete yoga practice in a single exercise.
Let's break down the biomechanics of Sat Kriya. First, you are sitting on your heels, which stretches the quadriceps and stimulates the digestive meridians, correct?
Exactly. Then you stretch your arms straight up over your head, hugging your ears. You interlace all your fingers except your index fingers, which point straight up.
It looks a bit like a steeple.
Yeah, and this posture creates a slight tension in the fascial network of the arms and torso, aligning the central channel, the sushumna.
And the chant is Satnam. Sat meaning truth, Nam meaning identity. But the magic is really in the physical pump.
As you audibly and sharply chant Sat, you forcefully pull your navel point, which is the area just below the belly button, in and up toward your spine.
You are physically contracting the abdominal muscles and the diaphragm.
And as you chant Nam, you completely relax the belly.
So it is a rhythmic, percussive pumping. Sat, pull in. Nam, release. Sat, pull in. Nam, release.
You are physically massaging the internal organs. You are drastically increasing the blood flow to the digestive tract. But on an energetic level, you are taking that apana, the dense, heavy, eliminating energy in the lower abdominal cavity, and forcefully mixing it with the prana, the upward-flowing vital energy.
You are stoking the biological furnace. You are generating that intra-abdominal pressure we talked about earlier to gently heat and awaken the Kundalini energy at the base of the spine. Just 3 minutes a day begins to fundamentally reorganize the nervous system.
It's incredibly potent.
I have to bring up a major concern here, though. If you search Kundalini online, you inevitably stumble into forums discussing Kundalini syndrome. You read stories about people experiencing spontaneous shaking, intense heat, severe anxiety, or feeling like their nervous system is completely overwhelmed. It sounds terrifying.
It does sound scary.
Is this actually safe for someone who has never done it? Can 3 minutes of Sat Kriya blast your nervous system into outer space?
The fear is based on a misunderstanding of how the energy moves. There is a profound biological difference between an unearned, abrupt Kundalini arousal and the systematic practice of Kriya Yoga.
The unearned awakening is usually the result of trauma, excessive and reckless use of psychedelics, or doing intense advanced breath work without any foundational physical preparation, right?
Exactly. If you attempt to run 1,000,000 volts of electricity through a 10-volt household wire, the wire melts. The insulation burns off.
The nervous system becomes overwhelmed because it lacks the structural capacity to process that level of bioelectric energy?
Yes. It lacks the vagal tone in the neural pathways. That is what causes the shaking and the psychological distress. The hardware isn't ready for the software update.
But the Kriya is precisely designed to upgrade the wire first.
A Kriya strengthens the physical nervous system. It clears the fascial pathways, balances the endocrine system, and gradually increases the capacity of the hardware.
There's a metaphor in the texts about this, right?
Yeah, the traditional texts use a beautiful metaphor for a properly managed awakening. They contrast it with a rocket taking off. An unearned awakening is a violent rocket launch. A systematic awakening is like a noble queen waking up from a deep sleep.
Oh, I like that. She opens her eyes slowly. She stretches. She might doze off again for a moment. She turns her head.
It is gentle, gradual, and integrated. You spend months or years simply doing the breath work, pumping the navel, and regulating the nervous system. The energy only rises when the body is perfectly capable of sustaining it.
So the directive for the beginner is absolute patience. Do not force the mechanism. If you sit down to do Sat Kriya and your shoulders are screaming after 1 minute, put your arms down.
Absolutely. If you have knee issues and can't sit on your heels, sit in a chair with your feet flat on the floor.
Make it accessible.
If the physical movement is completely inaccessible, you can sit perfectly still, breathe deeply, and simply visualize the pumping of the navel and the flow of energy.
Because visualization actually works, doesn't it?
It does. Neuroplasticity research demonstrates that intensely visualizing a physical movement activates the exact same motor cortex pathways as actually performing the movement.
Yeah.
The visualization alone alters the neural architecture.
The ultimate takeaway from the experts is that the universe is fundamentally friendly. This practice is not a grueling punishment. It is an act of extreme self-compassion.
Beautifully said.
You are utilizing a 9,000-year-old technology to systematically clear away the neurological debris, the stored trauma, the chronic stress, the outdated programming, so that the natural, radiant baseline of your own consciousness can finally emerge.
It is the ultimate journey of reclaiming your own biology. We've traced this from the secretive, esoteric caves of 7,000 BCE, understood why empires feared a physiologically sovereign population, and looked at how Yogi Bhajan democratized it for the modern householder.
We've translated the poetic language of coiled snakes and spinning chakras into the precise neuroanatomy of the spinal cord, the vagus nerve, and the endocrine plexuses. We've seen how the hydraulic pressure of the bandhas and the rhythm of the kriyas physically alter the cerebrospinal fluid and rewrite the stress pathways of addiction.
And we've given you the manual. Tune in with the Adi Mantra and begin to heat the furnace with Sat Kriya.
But if we want to look at the absolute bleeding edge of where this ancient science is intersecting with modern physics, there is one final staggering concept in the source material.
The bioquantum architecture.
The bioquantum architecture. Lay it on us.
We have to look at the intersection of quantum physics and cellular biology. In quantum mechanics, the double-slit experiment famously demonstrated that the very act of observation collapses the wave function.
Meaning the presence of an observer fundamentally dictates the behavior of the physical matter being observed.
Exactly. It changes from a wave of probability into a fixed particle simply because it is being watched.
Observation literally alters reality at the subatomic level.
Now, bring that into the human body. The emerging field of quantum biology, pioneered by researchers like Fritz Albert Popp, has demonstrated that human DNA acts as a highly structured, oscillating molecule that emits weak flashes of coherent light.
Which are called biophotons.
Yes, our cells are literally communicating with each other non-locally at the speed of light using these biophotons. The body is a matrix of light.
So consider the mechanics of Kundalini meditation through this lens. You close your eyes, you apply the locks, you take your profound, concentrated power of observation, and you turn it entirely inward, a state of hyperinteroception.
You intensely focus your conscious awareness on the base of your spine, on your nerve plexuses, on the flow of your own breath.
And if quantum physics dictates that observation collapses the wave function and affects physical matter,
then by aiming the intense laser focus of your own consciousness at your internal biology, you are acting as the quantum observer of your own cells.
wow,
You might literally be forcing the biophotonic light emissions of your DNA into a state of higher coherence.
right.
You are not just stretching muscles or breathing deeply. You are utilizing the physics of observation to dictate the materialization of your own physical healing.
That reframes everything. You are performing an act of quantum bioengineering. The human body is not a machine where you pull a lever and a gear turns. It is a luminous, vibrating quantum architecture. And the encrypted software to operate it at its maximum potential has been waiting for you for thousands of years. Take a few minutes today, dial in the frequency, sit still, and see what happens when you finally introduce yourself to the incredible technology of your own nervous system.